Stacey Williams, American Rivers.
Okay.
Harold Decker with NRCS.
And RCS. Okay. Sir, do you just want to introduce yourself?
Wayne Clinton, Story County Supervisor.
Okay. And do you want to introduce yourself again, ma'am?
Michelle Mihalovich, Association of State Floodplain Managers.
All right.
Just a PIO, so I don't know anything.
10 o'clock, right?
Katie.
Katie Nolan, Army Corps of Engineers.
And I'm Debbie Lee. I'm going to be the facilitator for this session. So a brief recap of the existing standards on natural approaches. After I get the recap, we're going to move into a brainstorming session and to hear about what you'd like to support or change within the implementing guidelines. The focus is on natural systems and ecosystem processes. We can talk about the implementing guidelines more generally as well. As we move through the conversation, as a reminder, you have your comment worksheets. If you hear anything or you think of anything that you want to make sure that gets put down on the record, please make sure you write it down. We are not taking notes during this, so anything that you want on the record has to be written down on the worksheet. Agency support staff like Katie here can answer questions, but if there's a question that you cannot answer, please make sure you write it down on the worksheet. Your questions are just as important as the comments. So the focus of this group is on the implementing guidelines for developing project alternatives that incorporate natural systems, ecosystem processes, and nature-based approaches in achieving multiple project objectives, including managing flood risk. It encourages the use of natural systems and nature-based approaches to reduce flood risk whenever possible. So some examples of this are Everglades restoration, creating or preserving natural floodplains, for example. So you two gentlemen just joined us. Do you want to give a brief introduction of who you are and what groups you're with?
I'm sorry, I'm Rich Fitch from the Home Builders Association, Lyle.
Okay.
I'm Glenn Siders, I'm a developer.
Okay, do you guys want to move closer, or we're on a small group, so just want to it's possible to move closer if you want to. So that is my section. I'm going to open up the discussion to you. If you have any questions you want to raise, if you have any comments you want to raise, if there's anything you want to talk about, please feel free. Does anybody have any comments?
I guess I can start
Sure.
just with some general thoughts. I would like to see natural and non-structural solutions prioritized as part of managing flood. So protecting floodplains, restoring wetlands, protecting wetlands, encouraging limited development within some of the natural areas. I think that there are smart places to build and maybe places that don't make as much sense. So figuring out where that makes sense, and then also looking at how our climate is changing and what are going to be, what's going to be the new normal as a result of that, and how that will impact flooding in the future on existing communities as well as future development practices.
So I'm actually going to turn that back to you a little bit. So with the understanding that this part of the guidelines is voluntary, how would you recommend FEMA incorporate in these guidelines, knowing that they're voluntary, to encourage people to use that nature-based approaches or natural processes?
Give me a moment.
Okay.
I hear what you're saying, and I tend to agree with you on a smaller scale. But when you see, I was alive during the flood of '93. Not only alive, I was a younger man at the time. It was so monstrous. I mean, Sailorville, Red Rock, Rathman were over their spillways. I don't know how you would manage something like that. The enormity of that kind of problem. It wasn't due to non-absorption, it was just due to record rainfall.
And I agree that, there are these natural, disasters. They're called natural disasters for a very real reason. 93 as well, from right around this community originally. And that those then effects are exacerbated in some ways, and in a lot of ways not protecting the natural mechanisms that are in place to filter and store floodwater and these types of things, but still doesn't get to back to your.
So I'm trying to get to you guys to brainstorm specifics that FEMA could think about when developing these guidelines, or make sure to incorporate these guidelines. Because I hear what you're saying, that there are moments that natural resources might not be the right tool. There are other cases where they are. So how should FEMA implement in the guidelines ways to encourage those approaches whenever suitable or possible?
It doesn't matter. Well, we currently have stormwater retention. We have to retain stormwater on our projects. The allowable discharge is only what would have been there before the project was constructed. Supposedly, in a normal situation, you're not contributing any more to the overall storm sewer than you did. By storm sewer, I'm talking about creeks, rivers, reservoirs. You're not putting any more into those than you would have before the development was there.
Can you guys hear everything that's being said over
Yeah,
here?
we can
Okay,
hear.
just want to check. All right. Some very stormwater retention. Is there any other thoughts or comments that you wanted to bring up? Any questions you wanted to ask?
I would think one of the things that FEMA could do would be work with the enforcing agencies and local municipalities on how some of this works and accepting some of those ideas. Because you can have your set but then a municipality have their own regulations that they will ignore. I won't say they will ignore guidelines, but some of these things like volunteering stuff may not be applicable to the city. The city may simply say, we're going to do this, and they don't listen to the reason of some of these other things that might accomplish some of the original requirements. So educating those municipalities, find out how these benefits would be very helpful.
Okay, so reaching out, FEMA should reach out, or another agency should talk to the municipalities. Okay. Any other thoughts or comments? So going back to your comment then, are there ways that the municipalities can be encouraged to reach out to FEMA on the other end?
I'm sure there are. I can't think of
We cross. In my business, I cross, varying interpretations and requirements brought up by, I think, the Clean Water Act back in '92 or something. I don't think we have to get into FEMA. I don't think we ever.
Usually you don't, I haven't had dealings with FEMA unless you have a flooding situation and your insurance.
Yeah.
And insurance is involved. And then you may have, FEMA may come into the picture when it comes time for potential buyout of an area or something like that. But when I go develop in a floodplain area, I just deal with municipality, I don't deal with FEMA. And that's where there's a disconnect. I don't know that they deal with FEMA either. But they have their own floodplain regulations, and every municipality varies on what those regulations are.
Stacey, you were going to say something. Were you?
I was with them. Okay. And I got distracted by what he was saying. I was going to say something. No, I don't even know which part what my comment was going to be. It was going to be something along the lines of something that I think is really important, and that I know is parallel to some of this, and parallel to kind of what he was saying, is when there are these repetitive loss areas, and we were just listening to some folks in the other session that were talking about, they were in one of those situations where they're in this repetitive loss area, and they're not sure what they're going to do. But rather than continuing to pay to fix, when there are willing sellers to prioritize buyout and in some of these repetitive loss areas, and at the local level, and or whether at the the FEMA level, encouraging ordinances, more localized ordinances that encourage those types of programs. And I know through the community reading system that that is part of it. But that's
I actually am seeing that what you're saying ties into what they're saying too, which is that there is a potential disconnect between the different areas and the possible lack of communication that could and should be addressed. And if you have any thoughts on how that can be addressed in the guidelines, that would be great too.
And maybe at first it's just recognizing that and recognizing where there could be potential for
This is off the subject, but when you have flood insurance and you're repetitively flooded out, and insurance pays, people take that money and rebuild the same place, or do they usually build somewhere else?
No, you have to, unless they pay to buy out, you have to build it in the same place.
Who made that regulation?
Silly thing.
FEMA, I think.
Seems like an obvious change in tactics rather than going through the brainstorming.
That was kind of to my point of encouraging some of these other things that
She talked about buyouts, and I'm a developer, and I develop in Flint. There's areas that I've owned property for years and years and years, and that's part of my development plan, my business. And I'll be the first one to admit the best way to prevent flooding is don't build floodplain.
Right.
That's the best way to do it. But when you have an invested property in that, then I as a developer, I have to develop that property. You talk about a buyout, let's figure out a way you can preserve that to achieve your goal. And I can still continue to run my business.
Okay. I'm going to give people over here who haven't really spoken a chance to speak if they wanted to.
Well, the only thing I keep thinking about at the local level, the challenge always is the economic impact. When you're going to allow development in a floodplain, you're looking at it from the standpoint that your flooding probably is not going to occur every year. So therefore, if you may have 8 to 10 years, you might have 1 or 2 buildings that might, you have to go in and have buy out that particular business. But the dollars that is generated over that span of time oftentimes forces municipalities to go ahead and allow for buildings as long as they are now elevating.